better. The weight in my chest, the sense of despair was always hovering around the edges of my mind. And somehow I kept functioning through all of that. Now, it wasn't quite as bad as Voldemort drinking unicorn blood and the centaur commenting that you will stay alive, but it will be a half-life, a cursed life. My life wasn't quite that bad. We were not killing a unicorn, and we were not drinking unicorn blood. But it was still, difficult. But then the lawsuit was dismissed. It was thrown out, and suddenly, the weight in my chest is gone, light dawns, everything seems wonderful. And so Ruth and the children and I go out to celebrate at the Texas Cattle Company. On the way home from Texas Cattle Company, the transmission in our van decided to die. And so there we are, stuck on the side of the road, and we learned that it'll cost $1,200 to fix the van. We do not have $1,200 in our checking account at that point. However, unlike other crises in life, for the first time in my life, I was not the least bit worried. And the reason for that is because after tens of thousands of dollars in legal costs, and after God taking care of a $31 million lawsuit, I figured that a $1,200 transmission repair bill would not be hard for him to take care of.
Amen.
I had the sort of faith that Hebrews 11 begins with, the confidence in what we hope for and the assurance about what we do not see. Why? Because I could remember what God had just done for us. It hadn't been very long ago, so I hadn't had the opportunity to forget yet. I could remember. And of course, he did take care of the bill. We no longer have that van. That was 20 years ago, but still. So today's passage is Hebrews chapter 11, verses 1 through 4. Now, faith is confidence in what we hope for, and assurance about what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. By faith, we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. By faith, Abel brought God a better offering than Cain did. By faith, he was commended as righteous when God spoke well of his offering. And by faith, Abel still speaks, even though he is dead. Let's pray. Father, we'd ask that you bless us this morning as we look into your word. Help us to understand what's here and to apply it to our lives. Let it help us as we go about the course of our daily events this week. In Jesus' name, amen. Hebrews 11. Now, faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. And so the question before us today is, what in the world is faith? It's one of those church words. We say it easily, but it's rarely defined or explained. And simply quoting today's passage does not necessarily help because it's so familiar to us. It's become a cliche, and so it doesn't really resonate that much anymore. We've heard it all before. So what can I say that will make it clear? Well, let's see what I'll come up with. The author begins with a definition for a word he or she has been using for a while now in the book of Hebrews. So it's important that we understand and know what faith is. The whole concept of theology, which is what's going on here, is a melding of Christian and Greek thought and Jewish thought coming together. Christianity is responsible for the existence of theology as a subject. That is, other religions have picked up on it, but Christianity is the one that came up with it first. And so verse 1 is the example of doing theology, explaining a concept in an academic sort of way. I'm really good at academic sorts of things. But you need to notice something here. This is not where the author of Hebrews parks himself. He doesn't kick back in his chair, pop a brew, and just sit here on the academic stuff. Because that doesn't really help most people. Most people are not particularly academic. It's not interesting unless you want to go to sleep. And so what he does, and what the Bible generally does, since the Bible is not just an academic theorizing sort of book, the bulk of this chapter is going to focus on stories, using stories to illustrate and to explain what faith is, how it works, what faith isn't, making it really something that we can understand. For a complicated topic, you have to understand it thoroughly if you want to try to make anybody else understand it. If you don't understand it well yourself, you can't explain it. And so the author is going to explain it to us. So what is faith? The definition by the author of Hebrews is one line, two phrases linked with a conjunction. I'm being academic already. Confidence in what we hope for, assurance about what we do not know. On the one side you have certainty, confidence and assurance. On the other side you have uncertainty, what we hope for and what we do not see. Faith is something of a paradox. If the money is in your account, you have certainty. If it's the day before payday, you have confidence and assurance that the money will be there tomorrow. How much confidence and assurance you have depends on whether or not the company that you're working for is Larry's fly-by-night multi-level pyramid scheme, or a business that has been around for a while. Whether you've been taking calls from vendors all day wondering when they're going to get paid, and you notice that the company's stock has tanked, or whether the stock is soaring and the company is on a hiring binge. How much confidence and assurance you have depends on who or what you're putting your trust in. The parachute you packed, or the parachute that Meth Head Larry packed. Whatever. And so the theme of this chapter, this is what the ancients were commended for. The author pulls on what he has just got done talking about in the passage we looked at last week. Hebrews 10:32 said, "Remember those earlier days after you had received the light, when you endured in a great conflict full of suffering." And so the author of Hebrews wants us to understand why, as he ended chapter 10, we do not belong to those who shrink back and are destroyed, but to those who have faith and are saved. And so, verse 3, by faith we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. Remember that the author of Hebrews does not think that his definition with which he starts out was enough to explain what faith is. So he launches into an extended set of examples, of pictures, to help us comprehend what faith is, how faith works, what faith can do for us, what it is and what it isn't. When Jesus taught, he mostly taught using stories. He told parables. The Bible is made up of poetry, essays, letters, and lots of stories. The author of Hebrews is now intent on focusing on those stories, and he or she intends to do it in a chronological sort of way. He or she wants those he is writing to recall, to bring to their minds, to remember the stories that they know, or supposedly know, and to consider them in the context of the definition he's given, the meaning of faith, how faith works, how it impacts us where we are. So in the midst of the crises of life, we must be like Asaph in the psalm that I gave you last week, Psalm 77. I cried out to God for help. I cried out to God to hear me. When I was in distress, I sought the Lord. At night, I stretched out untiring hands, and I would not be comforted. I remembered you, God, and I groaned. And then verse 10, then I thought, to this I will appeal. The years when the Most High stretched out his right hand. I'll remember the deeds of the Lord. Yes, I'll remember your miracles of long ago. Like last week when you got me out of the $31 million lawsuit. This week my van has died. You can probably help me. I will consider all your works and meditate on all your mighty deeds. And so the author of Hebrews wants us to consider all of God's works and to meditate on all his mighty deeds. Hebrews argues that Jesus is better than angels, prophets, Moses, the law, the priests, and the sacrifices. The author ends chapter 10 discussing the value and importance of faith. But simply asserting the value of faith does not necessarily help us much because, again, what is faith? We were not there when the universe was formed. We didn't get to see it happen. CNN did not report on it. There are no YouTube videos, no mention of it on social media, not even one tweet. We accept the creation by faith. It's an example of what the author of Hebrews says at the beginning of chapter 11, that faith is assurance about what we do not see. Soren Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher and theologian, which I'm sure you've all read extensively, he wrote so many books. No. You may know a phrase that's attributed to him, leap of faith. Actually, he never said that, he never wrote it, it doesn't come up in any of his writings, but he gets the credit for it. In any case, that concept has taken root in a lot of minds, that faith is a leap. Many believe that faith is a blind leap, an existential break with reality, a jump off a cliff into a void. But that is not the nature of faith in the Bible. Faith is not a leap, it is not blind. We are not called to have faith in God and then to close our eyes. One of the stupidest things I ever heard was in a college during a chapel service. And the person leading the music said, "Turn off your minds." That's the sort of thing that used car salesmen would tell me. Faith is not like that. God is not trying to rope us into a multi-level marketing scheme. He is not it's not an evidence-free zone. Now, the movie Star Trek V has many, many problems. It's not the worst Star Trek movie. That would be Star Trek I. But it does come close to being the worst Star Trek movie ever. However, it does have several very good scenes in it. And one that stands out is when the crew arrive at the center of the galaxy, brought to that place by the demands of Spock's brother, who is on a quest to find God. And they last stand before the being who claims divine status. The being tells Spock's brother that he needs the Enterprise so he can bring his wisdom to the galaxy. And Kirk stands up there, and he says, "Excuse me, what does God need with a starship?" And McCoy gets mad at Kirk and says, "What are you doing?" And Captain Kirk says, "I'm asking a question. I need some proof." McCoy tells him, "Jim, you don't ask the Almighty for his ID." But Captain Kirk is having none of it, and Captain Kirk is right. What does the name Israel mean? It means he struggles with God. We have the story of Jacob, the man who became Israel, the father of the Jewish nation, who gets his name for wrestling with God. Throughout the Bible, we have stories of people asking questions and arguing with the Almighty, and God doesn't get upset about it. There are no blind leaps. There's no turning off of minds. There is instead confrontation. Throughout Scripture, wisdom and knowledge are praised, while ignorance and folly are denigrated. Faith is not mindless. Faith is not unreasonable. Faith is not something that takes the place of knowledge. Instead, as Hebrews 11 tells us, by faith we understand. And so here in verse 3, the focus is that by faith we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. Now, Genesis begins with just the statement, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth." It's a summary statement. And then details follow. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. But there's still not a lot of detail, not a lot of explanation. Just that somehow God did it. He made the universe, it was formed at God's command. And what we see was not made from something visible. You cannot see a command. You can only see the results of a command. It is the results of that. It's the results that give us faith in the command. So what is faith? It is trusting someone. In our case, we trust God because God had the power to create the entire universe. The visible universe, if you stand here on Earth and you look out as far as we can look, the distance is 46.5 billion light years. The diameter of the visible universe, therefore, is 93 billion light years. Giant sphere, 93 billion light years that we can see. That's the visible universe, which is a tiny fraction of the universe as a whole. Most of the universe is not visible to us and never will be. Now, the Voyager 2 space probe was launched in 1977. It flew by Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. And since then, it has headed out of the solar system. After what is now 41 years of travel, at 35,000 miles per hour, or 17 miles per second, faster than a speeding bullet, it is now 9.5 billion miles from Earth. It takes 17 hours for a radio signal traveling at the speed of light to reach it. And yet, it will be another 40,000 years before it has traveled a single light year from Earth. And there are 46.5 billion of those light years between here and the edge of the visible universe. And that's what God made at His command from nothing. The nearest star to us is 4.3 light years distance. There are 400 billion stars just in our Milky Way galaxy, which is a flat disk about 100,000 light years across. The next nearest galaxy, the Andromeda Nebula, contains at least as many stars. It's 2,537,000 light years away. And there are at least 100 billion galaxies like ours within that 93 billion light year diameter sphere that makes up the visible universe. And that's what God made at His command from nothing. And each of those uncountable billions and trillions of stars has its own solar system of planets, and about 10% of those uncounted trillions of planets are in the habitable zones of their stars. And that's what God made at His command from nothing. By faith, we understand that the universe was formed at God's commands, but what is seen is not made out of what was visible. And by faith, Abel brought God a better offering than Cain did. By faith, he was commended as righteous when God spoke well of his offerings. And by faith, Abel still speaks even though he is dead. God is both transcendent, the creator of the universe, and God is immanent. Those are technical, theological, academic terms, my favorite sorts of things. Let's put it in a way that might make sense to us. Your telephone is both transcendent and immanent. It is in your pocket, hold it in your hand, and you can access cat videos. It is immanent, but it is transcendent. It's part of a network that circles the globe. It simultaneously, with thousands and billions of others, accesses data that encompasses all of human knowledge. Every book, magazine, news article, movie, television show, and song. All of human knowledge is yours at your fingertips. And you watch cat videos. There is no place that God is not. There is no time when God is not. There is no information that God does not have. There is nothing that can be done that God cannot do. He is transcendent. He contains the universe. But God is immanent. He lives inside of you and cares about you as an individual to such an extent that He is more interested in you than you are in yourself. He has bothered to inventory all the hairs on your head. I don't know about you, I couldn't care less how many hairs I have. He keeps all your baby pictures in His wallet, as it were. He is immanent. He is intimate. By faith, we understand God made the universe, and by faith, we look at two brothers, Cain and Abel. By faith, Abel acted. We move from the infinite to the intimate. We know very little about the lives of either Cain or Abel. They're in chapter 4 of Genesis, and Cain appears in a genealogical list in chapter 5, and that's about it. Abel brought a better offering, we are told. He did that by faith. How was his offering better? Was it because he sacrificed a sheep while his brother Cain brought grain? No, Because if you look at the Old Testament, if you look at Leviticus, one of your favorite books to read, I'm sure, chapter 5, verse 11 says, "If, however, they cannot afford 2 doves or 2 young pigeons, they are to bring as an offering for their sin a tenth of an ephah of the finest flour for a sin offering." So grain is perfectly acceptable as an offering. Leviticus 23, you have, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, when you enter the land I'm going to give you, and you reap its harvest, bring to the priest a sheaf of the first grain you harvest." Again, nothing wrong with what Cain offered. For Leviticus chapter 2, the same thing. When anyone brings a grain offering to the Lord, their offering is to be the finest flour. What's different between the offering of Cain and the offering of Abel has nothing to do with what the offering was. What was significant was the difference in the heart of the 2 people making the offering, the attitude, the mind of the person that was doing the offering. When Abel brought his offering, what does Hebrews 11:4 tell us? He did it by faith. That is how his offering was better. What do we see of Cain? In chapter 4, verses 6 through 8, we read this. "Then the Lord said to Cain, 'Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what's right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is scratching at your door, it desires to have you, but you must rule over it.' Now Cain said to his brother Abel, 'Let's go out to the field.' While they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him." Cain was angry. Cain resented. Cain hated. And Cain murdered his brother. There was something seriously wrong with Cain. He did not offer his offering by faith. What is the core of the Bible? What's its theme? What's it all about? Matthew chapter 22, verses 36 through 40. "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these 2 commands. Love God, love people." What did John write in 1 John 4:20 through 21? "Whoever claims to love God, yet hates a brother or sister, is a liar. For whoever does not love their brother and sister whom they have seen cannot love God, whom they have not seen. And he has given us this command: anyone who loves God must also love their brother and sister." Cain did not offer his offering by faith. He did not love his brother. He resented his brother. He hated his brother. He had no faith, no trust in God. He did not love God. He resented God. He hated God. One aspect of faith that cannot be overlooked is this very simple concept of love. It's not just a mental state, a dry academic thing. 1 Corinthians 13, verse 2. "If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing." How is love described by Paul in 1 Corinthians 13, verses 4 through 8? Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It's not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. You expect the best of those you love. The one you love can do no wrong. The one you love is always right, always there for you, always cares. You trust the one you love. You give the one you love the benefit of the doubt. You always assume the best of the possible ways of looking at a situation that they are in. You trust the one you love. You don't trust a used car salesman. You trust your brother, your sister, your father, your mother, your spouse, your friend. 1 John 4:18, there is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. If you don't have faith in God, if you don't trust Him, what does that say about how much you love Him? If you don't love those around you, what does that say about how much you love God? What does that say about how much you trust God? What does that say about your faith? Are you Cain or are you Abel? Cain feared God, but he did not love Him. He did not trust Him. By faith, Abel was commended as righteous. What does the author of Hebrews tell us just at the end of what we saw last week in Hebrews 10:38? But my righteous ones will live by faith, and I take no pleasure in the one who shrinks back. And this is repeated in the Bible several times, Romans 1:17. For in the gospel the righteousness of God is revealed, a righteousness that is by faith. From first to last, just as it is written, the righteous will live by faith. Galatians 3:11, clearly no one who relies on the law is justified before God, because the righteous will live by faith. Abraham believed God, and it was accounted to him as righteousness, according to Genesis 15:6, and that's reiterated by both Paul and James in the New Testament. So also Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness. We are saved by grace alone, by faith alone, by Christ alone. Faith is not a blind leap. It is trusting someone who has proven himself reliable. And it is believing the one that we love. And the one we love created the universe and all its vastness. And He cares about us so much that He counted all our hairs. Let's pray. Father, we thank You for the opportunity we have this morning to hear Your word. We'd ask that You bless our time together now as we move into the time of invitation. In Jesus' name, amen. It's time for invitation. It's time for self-reflection. You have the opportunity to pray where you are. You have the opportunity to pray up here at the kneeling benches, or you can pray with me if you'd like.
Let's go ahead and stand.